And we are back with more News Talk Saga 960. Mark Petrone with you. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petrone Show. Well, it turns out that Bitcoin has become a kind of political weapon. It's being used as a club to beat one of the candidates in the Conservative Party leadership race over the head with. And we're seeing it over and over again, and not just from other candidates, by the likes of the Globe and Mail and even the National Post, who say that all this talk about Bitcoin means that somehow Pierre Poilievre is dangerous. As far as I could tell, the only thing Poilievre really said was that Canadians should be free to get Bitcoin if they want. If they don't have a whole lot of confidence in the loonie, well, maybe Bitcoin is an alternative, and Canadians should be free to get some if they want and use it as a means of exchange. Well, that drives some people crazy. And so when the Bitcoin price fell, everybody jumped on that bandwagon and said, well, there you go. If you'd have listened to Pierre Poilievre, well, you'd be out $400 in an investment of $1,000 in Bitcoin. It's a bunch of garbage, as you well can figure out by now. But at least I'm thinking that if the Bitcoin price now goes up, well, should Pierre get some credit? I mean, should the likes of Andy Coyne and the rest of them, his critics at the National Post, Kelly McParlin, all these people, I mean, should they then give Pierre credit and say, well, good call there, Pierre. It was the right time to get into to Bitcoin. But what do you think about this? The idea that Bitcoin now is an issue in the leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada, BJ?
I think it's the first time that this is going to happen. And if I look into my little crystal ball, I would say in the future, you're going to see politicians who, many of them, by the way, hold Bitcoin, who will be bragging about how they predicted and they told people about Bitcoin and freedom well in the past. But right now, it's new, right? So it's the new fish to attack. I don't know who all these people you just talked about, these names in the fake news industry. I don't know who they are. I don't care who they are. I don't care what their opinions are. But what's interesting is it's funny that organizations like the Globe and Snail and the National Post, it's interesting that they don't have, I don't know, if they had like some sort of investigative department or like financial department that could actually learn what Bitcoin is so they could actually understand what they're talking about. But much like many of the people on stage, they haven't a clue. And the people around them don't have a clue, and they're just, part of my language, talking out of their ass, and it's irrelevant.
Yeah, and they continue to do so. I don't think it's having a whole lot of impact on whether Conservatives are going to continue to support or whether they're ever going to support Pierre Poilievre. It's quite possible that they may or may not. I don't think Bitcoin has much of an impact one way or another. However, it has been used and continues to be used. There's this story. It's a column by Ethan Liu. Pierre Poilievre's populist Bitcoin support signals impending crypto crash. It was they used the old story about the shoeshine boy who gave somebody a tip in 1929 about a stock to buy, and at that point somebody figured out, you know what, this has gone too far, time to dump stocks, and so they managed to save themselves thousands of dollars and not go broke when the markets crash. So I guess that's what they're saying. And this individual says, I wrote in March that crypto could be looking at a bear market. Back then, Bitcoin was hovering around $40,000 US. As I write, Bitcoin is below $30,000. I'm sorry. If we are in a true bear market, though, there will be more pain ahead and signs aplenty that we are headed in that direction. Well, what does that have to do with Pierre Poilievre? Yeah, she goes on to write, or he goes on to write, among these signs, possibly, is how Bitcoin has entered the conversation around the Conservative leadership race through the candidate, Pierre Poilievre's staunch support of it. That evokes a long talked about story about of a seeming outsider whose sudden interest in a particular investment area portends boom. So maybe Mr. Poilievre is the shoeshine boy. So this is how they're going after him. Ethan Liu, and then it was retweeted by by Andrew Coyne is that this strikes me as absolutely ludicrous. I mean, are they so desperate to try to taint, to bring down Pierre Poilievre that they're suggesting that somehow his recommendation that people should buy it if they're interested, that somehow that's a reason to go after him? I mean, this seems silly to me, but I don't know. What's your take on it?
I remember there was a Dirty Harry movie that the quote started with, "Opinions are like a certain
Gotcha.
orifice in
A-holes.
your body." Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Firstly, what would have happened if you put your money into the stock market last week? What would have happened? Right? The markets all over
Well,
the
okay,
world are
it
down.
depends on what time last week, because at
For
the
sure,
start
for
of the week
sure.
you would have lost money. If you put it in Thursday, you would be up.
Oh, okay. So what we're doing is we're playing with the time horizon then, are we?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at the time horizon. When did Max Kaiser buy Bitcoin? When it was, $1. It was $1 less than 10 years ago, and it's $30,000 now, 28,000. And this is the part of the regular cycles of having a deflationary asset and the network effect. And every 4 years, there's going to be a halvening. We're midway through the next halvening. This is almost like clockwork, which has happened throughout Bitcoin's history. But again, these newspapers, if they could only have a department that did, what do you call it, research or investigative journalism or something like that, they might understand what they're talking about, you know? So it's really infuriating. It's frustrating because it's purely just a narrative designed not only to attack Pierre Poilievre, it's more about attacking Bitcoin and not allowing this asset to get out of their control. But the establishment hasn't figured out you're never going to control it, ever. Simple as
Right.
that.
Well, that's one of the things that came up during the debate, the recent Conservative Party debate, moderated by would-be game show host Tom Clark.
Oh, he's
I
not that
mean,
good. Come on.
well, he's trying. That's why I said would-be game show host.
To be a game show host, you got to be likable.
Well, here's a tweet by somebody who kept an eye on that debate. Interesting close to Chadet's comment on Poilievre's plan to opt out of inflation using cryptocurrencies. Citing the recent plummet in Bitcoin, Chadet asks, do you actually think your parents would enjoy losing 20% of their retirement funds? So let's I know it's going to be painful for
what
you.
A loser.
I know, but let's listen to it. Let's listen to it.
Bitcoin has lost 60% of its value since November of last year, 20% in the last month. Anyone following his advice that we saw on YouTube would have lost 20% of their earnings. You actually think your parents enjoy having your parents lose 20% of their retirement funds? I mean,
yeah, Mark, what'd your parents say?
Voting for Pierre means you're going to lose 20% of your retirement money.
Well, he's lost 100% of his credibility. Wait, he didn't have any credibility to sacrifice to begin with, so I guess he's not out anything. It's hysterical. Again, it was $1 10 years ago. $1. It is the greatest way. It is the greatest hedge against inflation that has ever been created. Because in 2011, when the first Bitcoin transaction occurred, 10,000 bought 2 pizzas. Within the past year, 1 Bitcoin buys a car, and in a decade, a Bitcoin will buy a city block. But they don't understand what a deflationary asset is because they're too lazy or dumb, I don't know which it is, to do the research. It's just math. It's just mathematics. It's not complicated.
Well, Leslyn Lewis also went after Pierre Poilievre on the Bitcoin issue, and said, and her take on it was, well, how can you not support CBDCs, which the central bank digital currency, and support Bitcoin? To her, I guess she thinks that there's a similarity there, and then Poilievre had to respond to her, no, that they're very different. I don't know. What do you want to hear part of that debate? Let's listen to part of this exchange. I'm not sure this is exactly the right one we need to hear, but let's listen.
Right.
You said that we have never been so divided, or national unity has never been so challenged. What are you basing that on?
If we look at the last 2 years, we have seen families.
All right, this
torn
isn't a
apart
Bitcoin
by
issue.
COVID. We see parents not
Okay.
talking to children. We've seen a government that has pit Canadians against each other.
All right, so that's not a Bitcoin related matter. She did talk about it though. She mentioned it to say, how can you not support, how can you be opposed to CBDCs while supporting Bitcoin? So I don't think she understood the difference.
Well, what she said is exactly that. That it's interesting how Pierre Poilievre can say he's against digital currencies and support Bitcoin, or vice versa, something like that. And if you bought Bitcoin, you would have lost X number of dollars. Again, using the time horizon of, I don't know, when they started running for leadership, I guess. It's kind of infuriating. In the case of Leslyn Lewis, she needs to fire her entire staff. And the guy who's running her campaign, his last name is Outhouse. That says it all. We all know who he is. It's the same revolving door of losers in that party. And that's what always kills that party. That's what kills candidates and campaigns. That's why they never win any elections. Conservatives have won one majority government since its inception. And it's because of this revolving door of losers. And that's what, unfortunately, Leslyn has been subjected to. And hopefully she'll make the wise decision and cut them all. Because it's not difficult. It's not difficult. Spend 10 hours, get somebody to explain what a deflationary asset is, how Bitcoin works. That's it. How about calling some of us who you know personally, because there's a whole bunch of Bitcoiners in the Conservative Party that they want to pretend that are not there, but they're all the young people. They're all the young conservatives who are doing the impression of Jean-Luc Picard and thinking, oh my God, boomers, please stop, right?
Yeah, no, you make a good point. But, you know, you look at the Liberal Party, apart from the 2015 majority that they won, you have to go back to the early 2000s when they won the previous one. So majority governments are scarce these days by either party.
This is true.
But you
know why? You know why? Because we're focus grouping every opinion. Because in this case, Leslyn doesn't know about Bitcoin, so somebody's got to draft an opinion for her to say. How about, you know what? I don't know much about it. It's interesting. Yeah. We need to appeal to new technology, and we need to have an open mind to new technology, and perhaps it is for freedom. I don't know, but I would love to talk more about it with Pierre. But no, we have to do this disingenuous script of everybody being fake as the media, and thinking that's how we're going to manipulate the voters. And this is not what members are looking for. Members want authenticity. But if you're authentic, you get labeled as, you know, he's not a team player. No, he's a guy with an opinion who you may disagree with, but that's what this is supposed to be about. But they want to control everything. It's really infuriating. Yeah, it's infuriating. Yeah, and that, you know what, if they didn't do that, then they wouldn't have to worry about those million votes that went to Maxime Bernier, because that's what those people want, and that's their base. Anyways.
Well, they were also talking about the trucker convoy, which, of course, you were an integral part of.
What'd I do?
One of the loudest voices in Parliament.
Let's listen.
Voices,
Mr. Poilievre. You were not one of the loudest voices. In fact, you did not speak up until it was convenient for you to speak up. You did not even go to the trucker protest. You actually went and you took a picture in your neighborhood at a local stop.
Let's hear from
you
Mr.
did not
Poilievre,
speak up
please.
for the truckers.
Let's hear from Mr. Poilievre. Thank you.
First of all, I did go to the trucker protest, both on Parliament Hill and in my community. I was there at the trucker protest. I was on the street. I was in supporting those who were fighting for their freedoms. And I did. In fact, I did it. If I could, I opposed the vaccine mandates as soon as they were announced.
Okay, so you were right in the thick of it. I mean, do you remember Pierre? Is that true?
What Pierre did was he was asked, I don't say, ambushed by, I think it was the CBC, trying to label him and label, everything's right wing now, right? Like everybody's a white supremacist. So they tried to label the convoy that Pierre was walking by, and he actually turned around and handed them their behinds or their tuchus. And it was wonderful to see. And then he stopped and he didn't comment anymore. And you know why?
No.
I'll give you a hint. It's similar to Leslie Lewis. Because the same group of losers in that party who are running Leslie Lewis's campaign are also running Pierre's campaign. And again, they flush the goodwill that they've developed down the toilet because Pierre came out of the gates and it was great. And all of us were like, finally, somebody in that party is speaking up. And then what happened? The people on his campaign, and we know exactly who that woman is, told him to shut his mouth and not talk about it anymore because they keep trying to chase liberal votes. Stop it. Conservatives don't want liberal policies. They want conservative policies. Like Jordan Peterson said, we need to live in a world where liberals can be liberals and conservatives can be conservatives. And I know people who are liberal, who would disagree with many of the policies of the conservatives, but in general, at this point, would agree overall and support the Conservative Party if they just focused on fiscally conservative policies and spoke the truth and spoke their mind. That's what people want. And the years in the Conservative Party have been infuriating for me, trying to teach that very basic lesson to people in politics. But so many of them are sociopaths and they don't get it. It's so infuriating. Just be authentic. That's it.
BJ Dichter on Saga 960, telling the CPC candidates to be authentic, be themselves. Well, maybe there's no there for some of them. I think they're good. I mean, look at the last leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, a nothing burger, an empty suit who was prepared to be molded into whatever the consultants said he should be. And how did that work out for Aaron O'Toole? It didn't work out at all. It was.
Well, I remember when I met Aaron O'Toole the first time, honestly, the first thing in my mind was, this guy's crazy. Like, he's nuts. No, he's one of those people who just, when he looks at you, he looks through you. That's Aaron O'Toole. And then I had a meeting with him after Andrew Scheer was elected leader. And the guy was foaming at his mouth.
Why?
With his hatred for Andrew Scheer, and he was not shy about it. I was quite shocked. I was with somebody else in the party. We were both like, whoa, that's a little odd. And then he became leader, and the first thing, okay, that's not good. They're losing the next election. And it's because the same thing over and over again. Focus grouping opinions. Listen, have opinions, make mistakes, say things that are wrong once in a while. Guess what? That's what real people do. That's what, look at blackface, right? You talk about doing things wrong.
I mean, and you don't see the liberals saying, we got to be more like the conservatives in order to get some votes out west.
That's right.
They never do that. They've written those off as, well, you know what? We're going to win where we can win. We're not going to waste our time trying to get a seat in, Battleford, Saskatchewan, North Battle. I mean, it's not going to happen. They'll be lucky to get a vote, let alone a seat. And so
right.
they don't waste their time trying to be something they're not in order to try to appeal to this group of people or that group of people. Unless, of course, you say, well, maybe they've moved further left in order to try and suck some of those NDP votes. I mean, that is possible, which I know contradicts what I just said, but it only came up as I was saying that. In a way,
okay.
they've become the NDP in certain respects. People have called Trudeau the first NDP Prime Minister of Canada, and of course we see Jagmeet Singh, in his pocket, and he's getting his butt handed to him in a series of recent protests in Peterborough, which I'm sure you saw. There's more and more consternation among the ranks of some people in Ottawa saying, well, people are really angry. We've got to do something about these protests. It doesn't surprise me that they want to shut these people down. I mean, protests are necessary because they allow people to vent and show their elected officials that they're not happy with the policies that they're enacting, that they're bringing on. So the idea that you've got to shut them down, stop the protests, censor them on the internet, I don't know. This can't end well. BJ, what do you think?
Well, I mean, with the Freedom Convoy protest, it was shocking because as a political leader or political operative, you kind of want to look for those indicators and feedback in terms of how you're doing. Are people happy? Are people not happy? Whatever, because you want to retain your time in office as much as possible, so you can put forward your initiatives over a long period of time. So you're thinking, okay, if you're Prime Minister Blackface Diversity, and you have people from across the country who've just driven with tens of thousands of people who out-fundraised every political party in Canadian history, Jerry Butts. When that happens, that should be your indicator that, hey, maybe we're doing wrong. But the fact that they didn't, and they kept doubling down and going in the same direction, that's why I keep saying these people are extremists. They're ideologues, they're binary thinkers. They have no concept of people who have an alternative worldview other than themselves. So they are not liberal in any way, shape, or form. And that's why if the Conservative Party just leads with some strength and authenticity and ideas, even ideas that some liberals may not agree with, they're still going to support you because that's what they want. They don't want people who are going to focus group their opinions because they're tired of the empty suit. I mean, look in the United States, for example. Look what's happened with Trump. I couldn't believe it 6 months ago when Trevor Noah, of all people, from The Daily Show, that weirdo?
Yeah, I know. I don't watch it, but yeah.
Came out and started saying maybe things weren't as bad when Trump was in office.
Yeah,
think about it.
Canceled. He almost got canceled over it, from what I recall.
Yeah, I know, but that's the fringe extremists on the left. So personally, I mean, the whole getting canceled. Like I will never be canceled. If you understand how to avoid it, then it's never going to happen to you. Churchill once said, "Though if you have enemies, good. It means you stood up for something at some point in your life." That's what Conservative members and Canadians want to see. They don't want to see a party that's trying to appeal to absolutely everyone, because that cannot happen, especially in a society that's so binary today because of our binary and thoughtless media.
Yeah, trying to get along with everybody, you end up with getting along with nobody and not doing anything. Let's look at the Bitcoin price because it did take a tumble, but it's up at this moment anyway, over 5%. Well over $30,000. Do you anticipate, given everything that's happened, because it's peaked, I think, at $69,000, didn't it, at one point? And so now it's down to less than half of that. But in the past, we've seen pattern after pattern where it's taken a big hit, sometimes down 50% and more, and then bounce back. Do you anticipate, and I'm not asking you to call it here, but is this possible that now people are going to be jumping back in and, here $100,000 Bitcoin, here we come? Is that?
Welcome to your first Bitcoin cycle, Mark. Okay. Enjoy the ride. It's going to be like this. This is what happens. This is how it is.
Yeah.
So for somebody like me who's been through now 1.5 cycles, I guess now, this is all entirely predictable, and I think it's great. When I saw it go, I was hoping it would dip down around 20. But for me, I don't look at the price. I mean, obviously you look at the price once in a while, but we've discussed this. I just care about how many sats I have. That's what I care. How much Bitcoin do I have? Because I know where it's going to lead to, because I know what's going to happen after the next halving. The next halving is going to go parabolic a year, 8 months, 18 months, around there after the next halving. And then it's going to go down again by maybe not 50%, maybe 30% as the network grows. And then the same thing will happen 4 years after that. So this is part and parcel. This is what happens when let me explain what I think the problem is, people in the financial sector. Because the people in the financial sector are thinking it's a stock. And as I said many times, it's not a stock. It's a network. It's a protocol built on the network effect. Another network would be Facebook, right? Imagine if Facebook was a currency when it was created, and as it expanded and it gained more adoption. That's what's happening to this, except there is value associated with it. That's why the only thing that matters is how many Satoshis, how many sats do you have? Do you have a full coin, a quarter of a coin, 2 coins, 3, 1,000 coins, whatever it is? That's really what's important here. The day-to-day price is not relevant.
Okay. Speaking of Facebook, can you look into your crystal ball and look at the relationship to Bitcoin to the meta world? You know, the world where you're all wearing headsets and experiencing everything virtually. I mean, does Bitcoin have a role to play in that?
Well, Bitcoin will have a role in all of the internet. It's essentially going to be, Jack Dorsey discusses this frequently, that he and many others see it, Jack Mallers as well, sees it as the currency for the internet, which is what initially was developed for, although it also works in the analog world. I think a Meta, which is the digital world of Facebook, that's what's going to bankrupt the company. I would, if there's a stock to short, that's the stock I would short. And the reason is this. This whole idea, this concept of a virtual world is not new. There's something going back 10, 15 years ago called Second Life. It's a centralized world. You go on your computer, you log in, you have your own avatar, you can buy property, all sorts of stuff. Second Life wasn't utilizing any sort of either Bitcoin or we call clown coins, but Meta's not the only one. Decentraland is one, Sandbox is one, but none of those have the baggage of what Facebook has, which is no one trusts it. So you're going to go and buy a currency and develop property in Facebook's world. Okay, what happens if you put up a sign in your virtual property of Meta that Facebook decides they don't like it? Okay, we're going to delete you and get rid of you. So I think that company is done. It's a matter of time. It'll take a while. It might take a decade, but I think it's ultimately going to go the direction of some of the other social media platforms that collapsed when Facebook took. MySpace is a good example of that. Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to talk about where Bitcoin is at beyond that? I mean, you and I have discussed which countries are moving in the direction of adoption. You've mentioned El Salvador. We've spoken about the Central African Republic, I believe, it was among those. So we're talking about third world countries with very choppy records of having fiat currencies that get shredded over time.
Yeah.
You and I spoke briefly about Mexico, which would be a quantum leap in terms of countries moving in the direction of legally adopting Bitcoin as a mode of currency and exchange.
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, we talk about El Salvador quite frequently because El Salvador went the full Monty. It is legal tender. You have to accept it in El Salvador. You have to be able to accept Bitcoin there if you run a business. Panama went a different direction. They made it legal, so it's your choice as a merchant or a bank if you want to host a custodial or transact in Bitcoin. So you have the option. Mexico, we don't know which direction they're going to go. They're going to have something, whether it's legal tender or I have a feeling it might be more like the Panama model, that it'll be legal to transact in it. Colombia as well, where I am, they made, I think it was a year ago now, they made it legal for corporations and businesses to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That wasn't talked about very often, but that was a major shift here. Why? Because you're a corporation in Colombia, you're a company like Éxito, let's say, I don't know if they hold any, but if you're a large corporation here and you're losing X number of percentage per year to inflation, if you have a hedge against inflation that you can utilize, then why wouldn't you use it? Just diversification of your portfolio. And that was kind of the justification of it being permitted to be used on company balance sheets in Colombia. So you're going to see every country is going to, they're going to dip their toe in the water a little bit. They're not all going to go like El Salvador or Central African Republic where they jump in and say, okay, we're in the full deal, because economies like Colombia, I mean, this country, I've been coming here for 20 years almost. We were just talking about it this weekend, how much it's changed. It's nowhere near a first world country, but it certainly looks like it. It really is a completely different country now than it was. So now you have a lot of money that's been invested here, both foreign and people who have developed riches, who've been pulled out of poverty. Like, I know people who, when I met them initially, they were impoverished, and now they've pulled themselves out of poverty because of much of the investment that came into Colombia. So I think you're going to see that all over the world in varying degrees. The Western world, the the Western Europe countries, North America, they're going to be the last to implement it because they don't have the same need for it. You know, in the United States, it's not common to buy an oven or a refrigerator and use that as a store of value in case your currency collapses, right? In case you turn into Venezuela. Although that might be a good idea for Canadians because that's what's happening there. It's exactly the same strategy and process that I witnessed being down here when Chavez was in power.
Yeah. Well, we had a Venezuelan Venezuelan-born person on the show not long ago, Cesar, who spoke about it. He says, yeah, Trudeau's going down using the same Venezuelan playbook to a T. And if you know something about history and what happened in that sad country, you would certainly stop it from happening in Canada. But sadly, this particular slime ball there right now seems to be getting his way. But a lot of people are pushing back in Canada.
Toronto is Caracas in 2003. That's exactly what it is right now.
Benjamin Dichter joining us on Saga 960. I'll keep you on for a couple of minutes on that vein because it's fascinating. It made me think that, do you stand back and say, well, you fight as much as you can to save Canada from the clutches of this slime ball that's currently taking a wrecking ball to the country. But at the end of the day, if Canadians either don't wake up or choose to go down that same dark path, maybe you let it collapse. Do you look elsewhere? Do you start looking at countries that have traditionally been considered third world nations, like Colombia, for instance, and say, maybe the future growth is going to be in countries that we don't really think of as economic powerhouses, like Panama, like Mexico, like El Salvador. I mean, is it possible that these Latin American countries might be the tigers of the future, the economic tigers of the future, because they're more willing to do the things like adopting Bitcoin that first world nations are just too arrogant to do?
Yeah, I think there is an argument to be said for that, and that's part of the reason I'm down here and have interest in this part of the world, aside from cultural things that I've always loved. Look at it this way. What Bitcoin has done is the digitization of our financial system. So all other areas, all other aspects of our lives have been digitized, except for the financial system. It's still this weird kind of hybrid. Like, yeah, we use credit cards and we have Apple Tap and Pay and stuff like that. But the currency itself is not digitized. Well, this is replacing it. And it's becoming a digital network. And you know what they say? The economics always wins. And it is far more efficient, it is far more economical, and there is far more freedom with this finance 2.0, which some people call Bitcoin, the digitization of the global financial system in a way that it's unhackable. We'll get into that another time, why that's the case. It's not only completely secure, it has a cap. So we can all look at the value of the network and we can understand exactly what the supply is. There's a supply cap, meaning it's deflationary. And the last time we had a deflationary asset in the Western world was in the United States, believe it or not, between, if I remember the years correctly, approximately 1800 and 1850. The US dollar was deflationary. You would have twice the purchasing power with a simple $100. After 50 years, you'd be able to buy twice as much. And then we got into this, this system now that's gotten increasingly
Yeah,
worse.
The Federal Reserve changed all that when they came in and
It started a little bit
under
before then,
Wilson
but yeah,
in the early
yeah.
1900s. Yeah, and everything changed after that. And
Exactly. So Bitcoin is a way to go back to that,
yeah,
but with a secure digital network. Now, you tell me the technology. I mean, this is Anthony Pompliano's point. He says quite frequently, you tell me the technology that hasn't been digitized, that didn't expand in scope by at least 1,000 times, right? Because the digitization of things is the automation and expansion of aforesaid technology or device. Well, that's what's going to happen to our financial system. So it's going to be a time for us to, we struggle with poverty throughout the world. But remember, and this is a point for the bleeding hearts on the left, and I don't say that pejoratively, it's just that's where their headspace is.
oh,
But this is an argument for them because, they always want to help people who are in poverty. Well, the reason half the world's in poverty, and it's far less than it used to be, thank God, but it's because half the world cannot participate in a financial system because they're unbanked. And Bitcoin instantly banks people because it's both a currency and a means of account. So it's an accounting system or a bank account, if you will. And that's why El Salvador said, this is an amazing opportunity for us, as will the rest of Latin America, because so many of these countries are dependent upon remittances from their citizens who are living in other countries to send money back home. And instead of it going, 30% of it going to Western Union, it's now going through this automated system and getting directly to the people with a minute service fee to pay for the mining and security of the network.
Yeah, it's interesting. El Salvador did buy the dip. I think they bought another 500 coins or something when the price went down to in the high 20s.
I think he said 29,000 is approximately where they bought it at. Yeah. And so the people on that stage from the Conservative Party leadership said it's not a means of store of value. El Salvador, a country, bought it at 29,000. There are people who bought it at $1. I know somebody now who was mining it when it was cents. It was 15 cents when he started mining it. So it's an amazing. And the other thing is when people say, oh, the price is going down, whatever. You know what? When it was 69,000, everybody loved Bitcoin. And everybody's like, I wish I had more. Well, here's your opportunity. You wanted it cheaper, so you could buy cheaper. Buy it now while supplies last. And that's going down by the day by 900.
Yeah, and there's another 2 million to be mined. But I want to speak to a point you raised earlier about how, well, maybe you didn't raise it, but it came to my mind when I thought about the seizing of assets and how having Bitcoin would have saved a lot of people the agony of not having access to their own bank accounts, and just showing you just how tyrannical governments can be, freezing assets, seizing assets, preventing people from having access to money to buy groceries for their families. This is how tyrannical this vermin is running the country right now, and how Bitcoin all of a sudden could very well be something you could look at, because you say, well, we have a government that thinks it's okay to seize your bank account if they don't like what you're saying, or maybe you took part in a protest, or maybe you posted something on the internet that they don't like. Boom, we'll seize your assets. Bitcoin starts to look pretty good, doesn't it? In the face of dealing with such a dictatorial, authoritarian person that currently runs Canada.
The government of Canada, for myself and 283 people. I don't know if you saw that hearing where everybody was tossing the hot potato, FinTrack, the government, the RCMP, the banks. No, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. All of a sudden, everybody's scattering like cockroaches. It wasn't them who froze the accounts. It was always somebody else, right? This was an example of a Western government trying to starve us. Think about that. We could not buy water, food, medicine, the most basic needs of life, and none of us were charged with any crimes, with the exception of the few on that bullshit mischief charge, that BS mischief charge. Aside from that, none of us were charged with it. This was just an assertion from the government. The government implementing martial law and deciding you don't get to eat anymore. Well, that doesn't happen with Bitcoin. You have full sovereignty and full freedom, that when the government wants to enact something like that, they will have to negotiate with you. They will have to talk with you and speak with you, which, by the way, is something Justin Trudeau never did. Jordan Peterson was talking to us. Justin Trudeau wasn't talking to us, even though it was 6 months after he was ridiculing Modi in India for not talking to those farmers who were protesting. Well, guess what? We had a hell of a lot of farmers in our convoy. And Justin Trudeau did not talk. Nobody in his government did not even acknowledge any of us. And remember, a leader is not supposed to be an authoritarian ideologue. It's supposed to be somebody who represents everybody, including the people they disagree with. But he doesn't have the mental fortitude or mental capacity to do so.
I know that we've spoken in the past about how the convoy is not going to be the end in terms of the protest, and we've already seen more of the people, boots on the ground, protesters getting in the face of politicians. They're whining about it, which means that they should get more of that sort of thing from the people, provided that they do it in a peaceful way, in a legal way. That's all fine, but protesting is a perfectly legal way. When you're talking about civil disobedience, what else has your organization got in store for the future? I know that you're not giving. Can you say anything, or is it top secret right now? But I know you're not giving up, Benjamin.
Oh, no. Give us a couple of weeks. There's something in the works right now with a bunch of people, very influential and very powerful people who are very concerned and fed up, and they're tired of this. So this has not ended. I'm not suggesting there's going to be another several thousands of trucks coming into Ottawa. So everybody cool their jets. That's how it's going to happen. But there is an initiative in the works that will be announced very soon to help a lot of people that have needed some help as a result of what the government has done. And there will be some retribution for the government. It's time for the government to pay for what they've done. And I do think, and I'm sure you agree with me, that many of these ideologues in power need to be punished harshly and severely for what they've done to the reputation of Canada, for the reputation of Canada's financial system. Well, I don't know about you. I know a lot of high net worth people that are not touching Canada anymore. That's it. They're done. They saw what happened here, and they're not participating in this anymore until Canadians get rid of the garbage that they have running their country. But we will have something very soon.
Benjamin Dichter, coming to us from Colombia. Beautiful country.
Sí, señor. Sí, me encanta mucho.
Gracias.
Hablamos después.
It's the only word I know, I think.
You're in Florida, man. You want to practice Spanish? There's no better place.
There's a lot of Spanish speakers here for sure. Thank you, Benjamin.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Benjamin Dichter. All right. Got to take a quick commercial break. Back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and the Mark Petrona Show after this.